What if the same brain chemical that fuels your scrolling could also unlock unlimited focus, accelerate mastery, and even help to heal trauma? In this episode of ReeThink, we explore the fascinating connection between dopamine and flow, and why this matters, and the future for human performance and mental health. Welcome to the ReeThink podcast, where neuroscience and technology converge to rewire minds, markets, and human potential. I'm your host, Rüdiger Dickbly, the founder of Rewire Ventures, and today's episode is about dopamine and flow and how they are connected. So, just imagine, dopamine always gets a bad reputation. So when we think about dopamine, we think we have too much, right? But this is not the case. Actually, in actuality, you want to have a lot of dopamine. The problem, or where we get into problems, is how we earn it, because dopamine is part of our reward system, which helps us with focus, motivation, and reinforcement. So, and the critical thing is how we earn it. Whether we earn it through something that we had to struggle for, or we earned it just by basically doom scrolling or something around those lines. There's a very particular difference. And in the one hand, it helps you, it accelerates you to feel good, and it helps you to maintain a healthy state of mind, a healthy brain. On the other side, although there is a place where, let's say, cheap reward, in a sense, has a place, is important, but on the other side, when you always have this cheap dopamine in that sense, you will deplete yourself, and your dopamine baseline, your capacity, so to say, to have a lot of dopamine in your life will decrease. So let's dive deeper into this topic. I will explain you in really detail what is the difference and how we get the one, like the dopamine spike, which is the bad thing, and how we get the better one, which is the dopamine that slowly builds over time and helps us even have more motivation. So imagine everybody knows somebody that is highly, highly motivated. And you ask yourself how he's so able to do so many things at the same time, and he seems to do it with ease. The thing is, and when we have this observation, we think about basically this is somebody that has just a lot of motivation, and maybe he's wired that way. But the thing is, what I figured out, and this is part of my research, is these people, most of the time, what they have is they have a lot of dopamine receptors. They have a high dopamine baseline, and how they could actually achieve that is by doing a lot of hard things. This is the thing. So I explain it in detail, the difference. So we have Phasic versus tonic dopamine. So Phasic bursts are fast spikes, so intense, but they are very short-lived. So just imagine taking, for instance, I know it's a hot take, but taking crack, for instance, you will, and this is not because I took it, and this is just my observation, the things I heard about it, just to be sure and clear here. So it goes into the bloodstream very, very quickly. You have a intense high for, I think, 15 minutes, and then you crash. And that's the thing with the brain that is very important. And because you have to imagine still our brain is basically our hardware and our software in a sense together. So the brain is our software, how we use it, how it's rewired. This is basically our software. But our software is made for the ways we were living maybe 100,000 years ago. So these are all the same. And later I will explain something different, and this is also coincides why social media is probably not the best to consume it in a really high dose. So the thing is with dopamine spikes, so the phasic burst, so to say, is it's not earned in a sense. So you open up your smartphone, you scroll through Instagram feed or whatever it is, something around those lines, and then you get a really, really crazy burst of dopamine spike. So it's just like that. It goes up and it goes down very quick, because if you do that for, let's say, 10 minutes, you don't feel like you achieved anything. You don't feel better. There's still this urge to still do it, but deep down, you know exactly that's not going to give you any fulfillment. But there is something, and we come to that, there's something that you think you are missing out, the fear of missing out. Everybody knows the fear of missing out, right? So there's this micro sense of fear of missing out, and that's exactly what happens. But the thing is, with high stimulation and it creates a fleeting sense of pleasure. It's really pleasurable to, as I said, like, use these smartphones, use all these applications. They are really, really greatly made. Maybe you might remember that at some point, the internet website designs changed. So we had all this infinite scrolling, all these kind of things, and also the whole gestures. These are things where we know they are creating either a habit or they are very pleasurable to use. So it's no coincidence that scrolling up is similar to a slot machine or something around those lines. And that is that. So these things are used by purpose. Coming back to phasic bursts. So the problem here is it's repeated spikes, but what happens now, we downregulate our dopamine. So, and then going forward, we have less motivation for normal activities. So imagine a scenario, you have to do, let's say, you work on your bachelor thesis, and then first thing in the morning, you get your phone, you scroll, and then you have these dopamine spikes. Now your receptors go down in actuality, so you don't even build dopamine, so you deplete it in a sense. And then you want to start your bachelor thesis. Now it feels impossible. It feels impossible to do that. And these are the things that is like always a downward spiral that we're in. But on the other side, we have the possibilities, and this is tonic release. So we build dopamine by doing something very, very hard. I can give you an example also from my personal life. So whenever I do BJJ, martial arts, it's something I'm not necessarily looking forward to do because it's hard. It's involved with risk, so I can injure myself, and it's very taxing on my body. So I'm very, let's say, tired after I did it. Nevertheless, what happens after around 15 minutes, I start enjoying the process, because what happens is your brain or your body notice, okay, he really wants to do this, so let's give him dopamine, and your receptors increase. And then that's the thing what dopamine does. It creates a sense of pleasure while doing something. So it gives you the reward, the feeling of, hey, this is actually fun. And everybody has that from time to time. They had to do something they don't really like to do. At some point they just, okay, I just start cleaning up the kitchen, you name it, whatever it is, doing taxes or do whatever you don't like. You give up and say, okay, I just going to start. Then you start with your normal internal discussions and dialogue, how much this sucks and that you don't want to do it. Then after 15 minutes, oh, that's not too bad. And you keep on doing it, and then all of a sudden everything is done, and you said like, why do I do always such a drama out of it? Just rather start it. And that's the thing. So if you want to have a lot of motivation and you want to have a lot of ease and pleasure in your life, like long-lasting pleasure in your life, then you have to do the hard things, in particular at the beginning from the day. So, and everybody knows it. for instance, I have a good friend of mine, Chris is his name, and he had this whole notion about win the day. And the whole topic about win the day, or the concept about win the day, was basically doing certain stuff and stacking it on top. And that's exactly that. And this is the key basically. And the reason is tonic release. So, and that's what we want to do. And there's also something additional to that is, so it's the thing, you cannot detox from dopamine. That there is no such thing. The only thing that you can do, you can increase your receptiveness for reward. So increasing the receptors for dopamine. The easiest cheat code in a sense is, for instance, I didn't do it yet, but I heard a lot of like great things about it, is doing a silent retreat for 3 to 5 to 9 days. And just for those who don't know what a silent retreat is, basically the whole day what you're doing, you have no smartphone, no TV, everything except, and even the food is even boring. So no pleasurable food. And what you're doing, you don't speak and you meditate and you drink boring tea and boring stuff. That's it. That's the only thing that you do for the next 3 to 5 or 9 days, how long you ever going to take it. However, but imagine going back to the real world in a sense, and how sensitive you would be for reward. Then it's probably very, very easy to do the most mundane, basic things that you can imagine, that you are now thinking of, and you think, oh, such a dreadful activity, I rather not do it. And that's the thing. So that's the cheat code. So whenever you think you are overstimulated in a sense, then that's the fastest way to re-increase or rewire your brain, that you are highly motivated. And I can tell you about a personal story where I had the same problem. The interesting thing was, although I know all the things that I'm explaining right now, it's so easy to slip into that. So what was it with me? I was working, I had a lot of stress in that time. And then what I start doing is I start distract myself in order to cope with the stress. And how it started, started slowly and it increased with time, that when the first thing in the morning when I got out is I was on YouTube, and this was my rationale. I did not view the videos, so I did not watch the videos. What I did is basically I just heard it. So I put on a video, I put my mobile phone in the pocket, and I listened basically to the content of the video. So that's what was my rationale. That's not that bad. It's not that bad. Well, and then what I notice is my motivation, or my, let's say, my ability to tackle hard tasks were not as much. So what did I use as a strategy to compensate? I used something to add even more stimulation. That's the thing also with, like, when we talk about the phasic bursts, is now in order to do something that feels hard at the beginning, you need more stimulation. So you need more novelty in order to make yourself doing something. And that's the thing. And that's why it feels so, let's say, it feels like a addiction, using, for instance, social media over a long period of time. Although you, at the end, when you quit it, you don't feel that you accomplished anything. And there's one thing, there's an exception. It's about gaming, but I explained it in a second. And that's the thing, because now in order to get the same reward or the same pleasure, in order to do something, is you need something that stimulates you even more. And that's why you are in this constant loop of looking for something that is engaging enough in order to bring you the same pleasure that you experienced just in the beginning. And that's the trap. And that's why you see so many people in doom scrolling. And that's the thing. This is something I told my son, because my son, he's now 12, and he doesn't have a phone at this point of time. He has a smartwatch in order to be connected. He can reach out, he can send messages and so forth. But of course, we have this discussion right now because he's 12. Everybody has a smartphone. And the thing I told him, like, when these content are so interesting, why everybody is not really consuming it, but rather like swiping to the next to find something that is finally interesting enough to really consume it as a whole. And that's exactly that, because you are looking for something that stimulates you more in order to get this feeling. And interesting enough, maybe you had the possibility to observe somebody that had an addiction problem with drugs or whatever, alcohol or whatever it is most of the time you see them looking for something that gives them the same amount of pleasure they'd had with their first shot or whatever it is, but they are never satisfied. And now their whole life is around getting the next shot, and they discard everything else. And that's the thing. And that is what almost everybody's missing, because the smartphone or social media is something socially accepted. You have to be aware that the consequences and also what it does with the brain is the same. And that's the shocking thing. So coming back, we have the phasic bursts. I told you, this is what basically is used in social media very highly. Then we have the tonic release. These are everything that builds slows, is a struggle at the beginning, but at some point the brain says, okay, he really wants to do this. Let's give him something that rewards him doing this. And that's exactly what you feel when you start something. You struggle for 15 to 20 minutes, and after that it becomes pleasurable. That's exactly what happened there. And so if you want to feel more motivation and more a sense of the sense of achieving something, you want to do more hard things. And so so the example is, you have reels, instant spike equals also a crash, and it's never enough. And then you have something that is a struggle. For instance, reading, it starts slow. It's a struggle at the beginning, then it rises, and then you get your natural reward. And then after that, you feel better. So, and whenever you had a great day, it's probably because you started something that you didn't want to do it. So you eat the frog, basically. And then you could stack everything from there, because then everything else becomes easy, because you have more dopamine receptors. Your baseline is higher. So then just to check whether we covered everything. Yeah, there's one more thing that I wanted to discuss as well, because besides of the whole thing with dopamine spikes and the cheap one versus like the good one, the rewarding one, there's one thing that is also very important that comes in let's say a tandem with the consumption or the content of the consumption that we have. So basically, besides of like having these huge spikes and dopamine comes cheap in a sense, there's also another problem with the content. And most of the time, and this is something that is related to two things. So first of all, if you want to understand how media works, I recommend a book which is Trust Me, 'Cause I'm Lying. This is from Ryan Holiday. He was a researcher for Robert Greene. Robert Greene, you might know because his most famous book was 48 Laws of Power. Most people love that book. I actually not a big fan of it. Nevertheless, different topic. But one of my favorite books, I discussed this in the last episode, is Mastery, is also from Robert Greene. And he was a researcher of him. And he has great books about almost every topic. He has also mostly known for his Stoic takes. So he talks about a lot of like ancient Stoic philosophy. So he's very known for that. But he has like almost books around every topic, similar to Robert Greene in a sense. So it makes totally sense. Nevertheless, coming back to Trust Me, 'Cause I'm Lying. The thing is, in this book, it's really greatly explained what changed in media during, and once again, smartphone, social media. Because the thing is, now there's not a lot of fact checking going on. And in order to get most of the traffic, because now it's everything, it's about engagement and traffic, you are incentivized by Google to publish a news when something comes out in a completely new topic, is you are incentivized to publish it really quick. So what happened is fact check is not the thing, because now it's name of the game is now time. Who's the first? Because the reason being, when you are the next to publish something, or you are the first, or the first bigger outlet in a sense to publish something, you are the first to be indexed in the Google search. Whenever you are indexed in the Google search, the thing is you happen to have a lot of traffic. And so what happened, what he explained really great in detail, is a cascade effect of that a small blog is creating a story, and they're incentivized to create something which is a bit out there in order to get attention. And then what happened is you have a news outlet. They are now competing with the small blogs. They are now using this blog article of the news, and they just using it without fact checking in order to be indexed in Google search to get all the traffic. So that is one thing. And then the other thing that he greatly explained is the media outlets know what creates the most engagement. And interesting enough, it's also coming, it always comes back to our biology. Is interesting enough is that we are basically hardwired in a sense to give a lot of more attention to negative stuff. So negative news, negative things, or in particular negative in combination of something that outrages you, is more prone to be liked and engaged with. So you get the drift. You mean they are incentivized because of our nature to use more negative stuff, because they know the engagement about negative stuff is something that leads to more engagement, more sharing, does more traffic, does more revenue from advertisement. So keep that in mind. That's something really important to know. And now we come to the next thing that is also something coming from our biology. And I almost forgot one more thing to mention here is you have to also imagine that we are the survivors or the ancestors of those who were not the bravest. Because you have to imagine when somebody encountered a threat and he was running, the ones that were too curious and looked what was the threat might be killed. So he might not be having the chance to have a child. So imagine that. So we are all the ancestor of those one who were not the bravest. So that's why we have this bias against negativity. So negative emotions is something we are far more prone to give attention, because of our survival instinct in a sense. So now we come to Dunbar's numbers. What is Dunbar's number? Dunbar's numbers is that we are able to be very good with around 150 connection, meaning this is coincides with that we used to evolve in tribes or like small villages in a sense, and they consist around 150 people. So we are very good with managing 150 connections in a sense. This means also we are not really good to cope with everything that how our modern world is working, because now, so the news, social media, everything is international in a sense. So coming back to that, using that, so we have negativity, we are prone to be more, let's say, have a bigger reaction to negativity. And then something else comes along is we are also used to, let's say, our brain is more wired to be in a world that is linear, meaning, so for instance, coming back to Dunbar's numbers is when I see something 2 or 3 times, I know it's something that is infecting my life. I can give you an example. So when I saw twice a lion, I know it's a threat, and I need to be very conscious. Now what my nerve system my central nervous system does is now I'm in the fight or flight mode. So like we have a stress response. But now with our social media and also our modern lifestyle, this is also something not only particular with social media, you have the same reaction also with TV news. It's the same. Is we see now, I give you an example, something that is very rare, however, the perception of this is different, is shark attacks. Shark attacks is something that is very rare, but I can give you also my personal take. Whenever I'm in South Africa, when I would go to South Africa for a holiday and go to the sea, I have to tell you, I probably think a couple of times before I do that. And back in my mind, I always think about sharks. That's the thing. Although sharks attacks are not something that happens on a regular basis, but what now happens is when you see something 3 or 4 times, although it doesn't have an impact on your personal life at all, because it maybe happened in, let's say, USA or somewhere else, Singapore, you name it, you still think it has an impact. And when it's something negative that maybe coincides, whether it's a threat to your life, you are now in a fight or flight response. And then the other thing that happens is also you never deregulate, because normally in nature, whenever you are in this response, fight or flight, what you do is, for instance, let's say you are running away from the threat, is, and you can see that also with animals, that at some point when they relaxes, the body releases the trauma by shaking. And that's a response of the central nervous system. So they just shake. And then basically that's the, let's say, what is the right word for that? That's basically the right response to deal with trauma. And then you come back from fight to flight to homeostasis. So basically you are relaxed and you're good to go. But this doesn't happen because we are constantly feeded with this information. And then when we are on top, have too much load in our life with all the other stuff that happens, and we don't have time for our subconscious mind to process all the informations and all these emotions, then we are still stuck in a sense. So there's still like almost like something. Imagine, I have a good analogy to explain you that. Imagine you, just like a computer, you have your RAM, and in this RAM you still have like a lot of space that is occupied by the things that you didn't process, the whole emotions about fear or whatever it is. And so this stacks up, and over time at some point you are not able to be as performant that you like. And that's also something we discuss later when we discuss flow in particular, why recovery is such a vital thing to that. So this is also something I wanted to give you as a way to understand why social media is something that, in the way we use it right now, is not necessarily a bad thing. But also here, it's not that I'm totally against that. I think it brings us joy in a sense that we can share a lot of information. It's crazy how much we can be connected with people that are not here and in our country or wherever they are. And we can track how their life works and so forth and everything else. So there are a lot of like crazy and positive things about social media. And also I know a lot of people that build their business based on social media, so that there is a lot of positive things. But I think the way we use it is something that we have to be cautious. And in particular, if you want to use dopamine for the good and you want to crush it in life, that's basically it. So, and closing off the whole dopamine with my personal story, I started it basically, but I want to close it. So when I noticed that I have a harder time to motivate myself for doing the hard stuff in a sense, I used to start to drink a lot of coffee, and coffee is, I'm particularly very sensitive to coffee. And yeah, this created even more stress. So I was using more stimuli in order to make me do the things that were totally easy for me before, just to cope with stress. So the interesting thing, although I had stress, so whatever I should do was like basically wind down and have more downtime and detox from stimuli. But the thing that I had done was basically add stimuli. So you can see the pattern, add more stimuli in order to create the same response. So I felt good enough to do something that was a couple of months very easy for me to do, but was now harder for me. And at some point I realized that. So what I did instead of like cold turkey is I create containment on the things that were not serving me. So for instance, with YouTube, I told myself, okay, I don't do it in the morning. So whenever I'm going home from around 7 to maybe 8 o'clock, I have a window where I can use it, and then it's good enough. And the good thing with just containment is it's easier, and then you build momentum in a sense that it's then far more easier to at some point to totally replace it, because the draw to use this thing is gone. And the reason now, with all this research, I understand also what was the reason, is basically I created enough space in order to do the hard stuff, and then later when I'm tired and I'm on the way home, it was not a big thing to do, and then it was not a crazy dopamine spike because I had done already the good and the hard things. So coming back to now the favorite part of this podcast, this is talking about the flow state. So this is the optimal state of consciousness. This is where you want to be. In particular, if you want to crush it in life, you want to have a lot of flow. It's basically what it is. It's the optimal, or it's a different state of consciousness. And what happens is you have a sense of time dilation, in the sense that you lose track of time, because what happens, certain parts of the brain will shut down. So for instance, your frontal lobe, interesting enough, is also your executive function, also involved with planning. But what it also does is, for instance, your self-critic. Your self-critic is also in the frontal lobe and in the neocortex. And this is basically shut down to a sense that your brain is just now activating the things that are really necessary. So your inner critic is gone. You are flooded, like really flooded with dopamine. This means that just the experience itself is pleasurable. So you are not even seeking that to finish that you feel great. You already feel great by doing it. You have a sense of presence and calmness. Even some people report about that the ego dissolves. So you yourself dissolve. You're almost melting with your computer, and everything feels effortless. And what happens? Your brain is flooded with a very interesting biochemical cocktail, which helps you, first of all, being super sharp in focus, and second of all, he helps you to be in that moment very plastic. So it's also something why you learn very fast in that sense. So to give you an example what it does, and what it helps you with is basically, or the outcomes is, so it's reported that you can be 500 times more productive in this optimal state. Then it's also associated with hyperlearning in a sense. Maybe you heard about the 10,000 rules. So I think Malcolm Gladwell, he had a book called Outliers. And what he basically outlined in that book is there is a way to mastery. So most of the time we tend to think that there are certain people that just have an innate talent and they're born with something and that's why they master it. And that might be true, that there are like dispositions and inclinations to certain people having maybe a better, let's say, better access to something, athletic endeavors and stuff like that. But most of the time it's a combination of something that might be already there, a disposition, and however, while they're using it and they have enjoyment, they do it more. So coming back to the 10,000 hour rule. So basically, he figured that you need around 10,000 hours to master a skill, like really master, meaning on a really, really high level. And crazy thing about flow is that it reduces this time from 30 to 50%. Just imagine you just need to master a particular skill just in half of the time. And this is how potent it is. And then what's also besides of that, it also creates resilience, it increases creativity, and it creates a lot of well-being. So you feel ecstatic about it. And it enhances happiness in a sense and prevent burnouts in addition to that. And it works in cycles. We can have a look, but I will tell you something later. This is also basically from some insider who told me that. And there are not a lot of research right now outside. We have indication that this is the case, but now it seems that we have now a really good study coming. Hopefully I get my hands on it so we can have a look in our podcast to discuss it. So now we come to the flow cycle. So I explain it in detail how the cycle works. And the first phase is the struggle. So the struggle phase. So coming back to the whole topic about dopamine, you remember the first 15 to 20 minutes all the time, it's a struggle. So you have to go to the struggle phase. You have to struggle. Whenever you want to do something, you have to struggle for the first 10 to 15, 20 minutes in order to stick with it. And now comes the crucial point. In this struggle phase, you have to have the capacity for longer sustained focus. You need to be super focused in this 15 to 20 minutes. If you lose the ability to focus, flow is not an option for you. Let that sink in. Flow is not an option for you when you lose this ability. Of course, you can recreate, reestablish the ability, but nevertheless, it's something that you, that in particular, if you're in a bad place, it's a downward spiral in a sense. Then we have first of all, the struggle phase. Then we have the release. So you let go and you are saying basically yes to the fight. And then the magic happens. You come into the flow state and it can be very draining, but you just you realize it after you are done with the flow. And then really important, recovery. So when you really want to have enough flow in your life, it's recovery is essential. And there are like a passive recovery, but there's also active recovery. Active recovery can be sauna, can be going to the gym, can be breath work, can be yoga, can be stretching, can also be just walk outside in nature. So recovery is vital. And this is also something that is very interesting is I remember back when I was studying, and this was my math teacher. He used to work for NASA, and he told us always, like, whenever you're really struggling with math and you feel like you are not moving forward, take a walk. You see, that's so interesting. On the one hand, now we understand so much more things, but it almost seems like we are just having a better understanding and explanation of why the things work out the way that they work. But almost like everything that we understand right now is something that your grandparents told you. Like, for instance, like, always do the hard work before you. So, for instance, something my mother told me, whenever you go home, you do first your homework and then you have fun. So that's interesting. So coming back to flow, let's have a look about the triggers, because I found a really great website. So this is the website of Steven Kotler. Steven Kotler is one of the leading flow experts in the world, and let's examine the flow triggers. And be prepared. You will notice, if you pay a really close attention, you will notice certain things with the flow triggers. So let's go through that. I really can can recommend the website. So if you want to understand flow in far more detail, go to flowresearchcollective.com. You will have a really great explanation, and it's, let's say, it's still scientifically written in a sense, but not like a scientific paper. So it's really easy to digest. This is what I wanted to say. And even one more thing. So you can see I have the Comet browser. This is like the browser from Perplexity. So what I can do is easily I can use the assistant, and I can tell them, like, for instance, summarize this article. Boom. Neat, right? So this is the browser I use for my research as a side topic, but I wanted to show you that really quickly. But coming back to the flow triggers, you see, what we want to have both, on the one hand, we want to have dopamine. This is what we learned right now. And then also very important, that's a mechanism, reduce cognitive load. Interesting enough, we have less cognitive load when we are in this flow state, but because we are focusing on the things that matters in that time. And then we have the triggers, curiosity, passion, and purpose. So for instance, myself, this is like really, really big for me. I have endless curiosity for everything, and I want to know everything. And in that regard, I'm almost childlike. Then we have autonomy. It's also something. Novelty, complexity, and unpredictability and surprise. And what is also important, we're going to see that it's instant feedback. So during the flow state, you have in addition, you have the perfect condition where you do something, which we come to that, which is in the sweet spot of challenge and skill. So it's slightly above your skill level in a sense. So it's a challenge, but it's not too high of a challenge. And then you have complexity and unpredictability and surprise. Remember what I told you before about that website design changed, and we have endless scrolls and all these interesting things that are so pleasurable to use. Unpredictability and surprise. And that's also something I forgot to mention in the dopamine section, was that we get even dopamine spikes in anticipation of something. So meaning, whenever you are, let's say you wake up and then you anticipate that somebody might roach you while you were sleeping, just the anticipation of looking at your phone, checking for your messages, gives you already a dopamine spike. Let us sink in. So then we have the mechanism, complete concentration, what I mentioned before, deep embodiment, so meaning you are totally consumed by whatever you're doing, immediate feedback, so you immediately see the result of what is going on, clear goals. That is also something I'm big about, that whenever I'm struggling with something, I try to drill down the goals to have more clarity in order to make it really work. So that's why I'm also like a bit of a nutcase when it comes to writing down all the goals. So I have a application that I use, and I hunt my team with that using a ClickUp. Nobody really liked it besides of me. And then I mentioned that the challenge to skill ratio. So Stephen Kotler is basically talking about 4% challenge to skill ratio, because the thing is, when the challenge is too big, and for instance you have to deliver something in 1 hour, but the challenge is maybe 20% versus your skill, then it creates anxiety. So then we have also the like internal triggers versus the external triggers, creative triggers and group flow. That's also something I will mention something around those lines in a minute. Cognitive factors that spontaneously lead to a state of flow. That's an internal trigger. Then we have creative trigger strategies that aim the creative process. So whenever you have So team meetings can be very good for group flow when it's a creative process and everybody feels like they are part of it. This is coming to group flow. And group flow factors that promote collective states of flow. That's also something in group flow, and this is what I learned, is oxytocin is involved in that, because the interesting thing is group flow and like normal individual flow have a slightly different brain chemical blueprint, because, and this is also something I learned from a guy that is building a platform that is using or that is measuring group flow of based on video calls, and it's amazing. And he's a he's a PhD in neuroscience, and he has also his TEDx talk where he discussed group flow, and he's a total expert in that space. And this company, what he is building is basically measuring group flow. And what he told me, and that was interesting, he told me, like, in group flow, you need safety. So safety is a necessity. Everybody needs to feel safe and seen. And I was a bit surprised, because I know that, for instance, one flow trigger can be besides of challenges as skill, it can be that it's dangerous. So for instance, that's why martial arts creates flow as well. And it's almost the opposite. And then he explained me in very detail that the brain chemistry, or the chemistry involved in group flow and individual flow, is slightly different. Yeah, let's come back to the 22 flow triggers. We got that already. Autonomy, complete concentration, passion, purpose, and curiosity. I think that's a big one. Every entrepreneur knows this one as well. And this is also one of my let's say theories, is that a lot of entrepreneurs, in particular serial entrepreneurs, are probably just addicted to the flow they receive by doing something. And I have to tell you, when I was in my early 20s and I was part of a startup, this was my first job. I also started as an intern there. I had a lot of moments where I had flow. And this was one of the reasons why I wanted to build companies, starting in when I was very young, because I witnessed that how it is to build a company. Because basically this company I was part of, I was maybe the 5th or 6th employee back then. As I said, I started as an intern, and the company was sold within 2 years, and I was almost in every phase part of it. And one of the things that really struck me, it was like the time we had back then, and how much fun it was. And reason was that it was creating a lot of flow in that time, and I learned so much in just this small amount of time. Yeah, coming back, immediate feedback, clear goals, challenge to skill ratio. We got that, autonomy. So, I mean, I will link it in the description, and you can have the time to figure that, to check it out by yourself. But let's go further. Skill, challenge to skill ratio, maybe it's mentioned here, also known as flow channel, for the Goldilocks zone. Is the dialectic balance between the level of challenge presented by task and skill level. When the challenge of an activity matches or slightly exceeds your skill level, it creates an optimal state in flow. In this sweet spot, the task is neither too easy nor too difficult, leading to a sense of engagement and focus. If the challenge is too low compared to your skill, It can result in boredom, disinterest. Conversely, if the challenge is too high, it can lead to anxiety and frustration. You can see that's also, I'm struggling most with this one. I have to be brutally honest here. Nevertheless, this is also something when the challenge is too high. So when you have your company, I think that's really important to when you looking for employees, that you find somebody that has enough, where the task they have to do is challenging enough, but it will not bore them to death. So that is that. So external flow triggers. So internal is something that you can, let's say, produce from within. External flow triggers is the environment that you can create. That's also very big for entrepreneurs. Novelty, risk, complexity, unpredictability, and deep embodiment. Deep embodiment can be also achieved by, for instance, a workplace that is very tidy and bare bones in a sense. So, yeah, I mentioned that risk. Risk is something, but as I said, like only for individual flow, not for group flow. So the willingness to take challenges or engage in activity that involves a certain level of risk can enhance flow experience by adding excitement, novelty, and the need for focused attention and adaptive response. That's exactly what I'm witnessing or experiencing while doing BJJ, martial arts. It's because I know I can have an it will not come out. I can be hurt. So that's the thing. I can be hurt. That's why I have to be super focused and present, and that helps me with that. And that's why after that I feel totally tired, but I feel great, like really, really great. So physical risk, like extreme sport, that's also why you can see people who do like extreme stuff that always come back to that, probably because they have a lot of flow in their life. There's one book. This is where what brought me to the whole topic was the book of Stephen Kotler is The Rise by Superhumans. And what he did is basically he wanted to understand why certain people can do the unthinkable. And so he did some research, and he basically went to discuss this with extreme athletes. And what he noticed is basically they were accessing this state of consciousness a lot. And that's why they were able to ride waves that were way too high, for instance. Or there was one guy that was performing the stunt of traversing the Chinese wall with a skateboard, like all these crazy things. And the craziest thing was this guy did it twice, and at the first time he broke his ankle, but because he was in flow and had all these nice brain chemicals working for him, he was able to do it a second time with a broken ankle, which is crazy, ankle. So novelty, interesting enough, novelty, you might see, I mentioned that before, that's something that is heavily used by social media apps and all other addictive apps. Then we have complexity, unpredictability, deep embodiment. Then that's also something, that's probably something big for me, creativity and pattern recognition. And then what we have, now it comes to group flow. As I mentioned, slightly different. Shared goals, close listening, you see, being fully present and attentive to what others saying. Yes, and responding to contributions from others with acceptance and build upon their ideas. That's the whole topic about safety. Everybody needs to feel included in order to group flow can happen. Sense of control, bleeding egos. That's also very important, that in that moment, it's not who contributed and what was contributed. It's everybody feels like we are one unit at this point of time. Equal participation, everybody feels engaged in the same way. Familiarity, knowing and understanding each team member's tics and tendencies. Constant communication. Everything is flowing in a sense. Like everybody is in instant communication. Everybody understands. I think that's also something, group flow, you can see it with soccer teams, for instance, when they are just basically playing something that is outside of what they are usually doing. And then you can see that they almost, you feel like they already know where the ball is going or where the other guy is passing. This is probably because they are accessing group flow in that moment. Yeah. So we can go on of this, but I think you get the gist of it. And coming back to what I wanted to add as well is basically a small story, and this closes the whole topic about flow and what I mentioned at the beginning, that it might have the potential to heal trauma. It's basically in this book that I mentioned, The Rise of Superhuman by Stephen Kotler. He began the whole book with how he had a problem, a severe severe illness that he had at that time. So he had a Lyme disease, and this Lyme disease basically attacked his nerves. This is what I remember. And this was so severe that he was basically all the time in totally pain in his whole body, and he couldn't move at all. So he was not able to do anything, and he was basically a shell of himself. And at some point, and this happened by coincidence, a friend of him wanted to get him to ride waves, so going surfing. And when I remember the story correctly, he was at first not really a big fan of it, but still he did it. Just to give you the picture, he was not able to walk on his own. So the friend had to get him, put him into the car, then he had to get him out of the car, drag him to the sea to bring him into the water, and he could barely hold on the surfboard. But something happened that at some point he could catch a wave. He stood up, and for around 15 minutes or half an hour, I don't remember the exact number that it was, the time that it had, he was in totally bliss. And something kicked in, and he said it was maybe muscle memory because he was a surfer before, he was surfing before. And he could stand up, and he was in total bliss, and he rode the waves, and he was not in pain, and everything was working out, and it was just a blissful experience. Then it's all of a sudden it stopped. He needed to be dragged by his friend again back to the car and bring him home. But something clicked, that he experienced for a long time a absence of pain and total joy and fulfillment. So what he did is that he did this again and again and again until his whole symptoms went away and he was able to live a normal life again. And that's how potent this state of consciousness is. And that's why it's so important that you want to foster it and have it in your life. And that's why it's so important, in particular, coming back to the first episode, it's so important to also help your children not having that. And it's so important that you learn to introduce a lifestyle in your life where you are not dependent or too much dependent on your smartphones and in social media, because this state of consciousness is so potent. And I can tell you more now, and that's something I heard it from an insider. At some point I will really reveal the name when I have the green light, so to say, is that this guy, he has a lot of data, and what he mentioned is basically he had already the intuitive understanding that this might be possible, but now they have the data that with this state of consciousness, with having flow in your life, PTSD can be treated, and also depression. So let that sink in. So imagine you have major depression or you had PTSD because you were deployed in a war zone, you have seen horrific stuff and you're still coping with that. Just introducing a lot of flow in your life by pursuing a passion or whatever it is, the symptoms goes away. Your brain rewires in a sense that all the symptoms goes away. And now imagine everybody has access to this state of consciousness. How prone you are and how easy you can enter this state is basically based on your lifestyle. You can increase your proneness to flow by doing certain things. We discussed that. And now imagine what you can do. And there's one more thing I almost forgot to mention that. Interesting enough, playing video games is not in the same way with like social media. It's not cheap dopamine in that sense. It's something where you still have to earn it. Of course, we are not talking about Candy Crush on your mobile phones, like old school video games where a certain challenge is involved into mastering it. So that is that. I think that's good news for certain people. Nevertheless, there's also something involved into that, but that's one of the reasons why gamification is so big. Well, and coming back to the guy I mentioned and the study they have done. So at some point, I will have access to the data and the study. We will share it and go into detail, but just just let that sink in. Let that really sink in and think about it. What possibilities we have access to. And as I said, look, having access to flow is something you can do for free. You don't have to buy stuff. You don't have to invest stuff. The only thing is it's just a change of lifestyle. That's interesting, right? And coming back to the whole topic of the episode, in a sense, is like we are, of course, talking about this industry that is building in the convergence of neuroscience and technology. So what he does now is basically with all this data he has, and now understanding that having flow in your life helps you with all these different things, can alleviate certain symptoms, helping you with mental well-being or helping you with PTSD. What he is now creating, he's basically creating a AI-powered training companion that helps you or trains you to introduce more flow in your life. Of course, as I mentioned before, you can do everything by your own. You can research it. You can check out the website and read a couple of books and adjust your lifestyle. And everybody, I'm 100% sure everybody at some point had access to flow, whether it was in sports, dancing, or whatever, you name it. Everybody had access to that state of consciousness, and we can introduce more by doing the right stuff. But if you still need training, or you need somebody that helps you because you may be in a difficult spot, because you can imagine somebody who might have PTSD. I think for him or this person, it might be very helpful that he has a system that helps him, that guides him, that gives him feedback to introduce more flow into your life to alleviate the problems. So I think that opened up a whole new array of applications and opportunities that can be introduced by that. So this is something that will come at some point. As soon as I will get access, I will share it with you. As I said, I will probably get access to the study and the data. We will have a dig into that. And then in addition to that, when we have access to the training tool, I will share it with you as well. Because once again, this is a great example of all these applications, all these things that are now being created and that helps us with having a better life, having more possibilities to hone our performance and actually fulfill our potential of the actual performance. Just imagine how many skills you can master in your life in addition to what you already mastered by just having more access to flow, because you did this training program that helps you to get into flow at will. And this is basically also what Kotler mentioned in his books, that it's possible to get into flow at will whenever you are applying the whole principles and you create an environment that is easy for you to access flow. So that's it for the whole episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Just to recap slowly what we have discussed. So dopamine can distract or drive mastery. Flow is real, trainable, and it amplifies learning, focus, and resilience. Tech can either hijack dopamine or harness it for growth. Gave you an example. And then also an emerging insights, flow may heal trauma. And we will get access to the data at some point of time, and I will be very excited to show it and to share it with you. Yeah, that was that. Be sure to become a member of the Reshaper Circle, and if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you find every link in the descriptions. And our next episode will be Pathways to Commercialization, how neurotech ventures go from lab to market. It was great having you, and have a nice day. Thank you so much.